Okay. So, so much to do when you are, okay. So, as I said, I run Read Aloud West Virginia, and just real briefly, if you don't know, and probably most of you do by now, Read Aloud is a West Virginia homegrown organization, and we read to kids, and we do it to motivate children to read for fun, because kids who read for pleasure will read outside the classroom. They will read on their own time, and when they do that, it reinforces all of the lessons that they get in school. And when you marry good, intentional reading instruction with lots of books and making books magnetic so the kids turn to them on their own, that's what grows readers, proficient readers, and people who are then able to take advantage of all the opportunities in life. So it's a really wonderful thing, a really wonderful way to commemorate the United Way's, what is it now, Lena, a century? It's the 100 years?
100 years today, this year, yes.
100 years this year. A really wonderful way to commemorate that milestone with a project that seeks to motivate kids to read for fun and connect them with literature. And so I like to invite people to just think about when they were kids and think about a book that comes to mind now that you associate warm, fuzzy feelings with, happy memories with. You don't have to overthink it. It doesn't have to be great literature. It could have been some little golden book from the grocery store. It often is something really sort of humble like that. But if you think about whatever title it is in your life that you remember fondly from when you were a child, chances are there's some adult attached to it somewhere. Mom or dad read it to you, a grandparent, could be a teacher. There's some adult who caused this to happen. They put the book in your hands, they read it to you at bedtime, and Read Aloud creates these opportunities. And as you can imagine, hopefully kids get this at home, but not all of them do. So it's important that that some of them get it elsewhere. And I like to include a few pictures because sometimes it sparks people's memories. Some of these are older titles, still good, still fun. I understand you all are doing Charlotte's Web. Is that what I learned from you last year, Lena? Last time, not last year, last session?
Yes, absolutely. All the books that come in, every child will get Charlotte's Web. Everyone will read a chapter or two of the beginning of the book.
That's wonderful. Okay. So we know reading to kids is a good idea. We know it's good. We know it feels good. But increasingly, and I can tell you back when I was in school, and even when I started out in my first career 30 years ago, there was anecdotal evidence. There was some correlation evidence. There was behavioral science that showed kids who are read to and kids who read at home do better in school. We don't know why, but without knowing why, read to the kids at home and hopefully they'll do better in school. Well, increasingly for the last 30 years, the brain scientists have been putting some foundations under that conclusion. They've been adding what they can see physiologically to what they knew behaviorally before. And so I have this diagram on your screen. Is your diagram animated? Is it moving like mine? Sometimes it doesn't animate. It works either way though. And what you're, pardon? Good?
Yeah.
Good. So you've got two pairs of nerve cells here. This diagram is showing you a pair of nerve cells on the left and a pair of nerve cells on the right, and the signal that's traveling in between the two. And you can see on the left, the signal is moving out of one nerve cell toward the other, and it dissipates. It doesn't quite make it all the way. But on the right, the signal travels lickety-split from one nerve cell to the other. Now imagine that's just a couple of pairs in a brain. Your brain is made up of, I don't know how many millions or billions of the zeros after a while become the same, but it's got however many nerve cells you have, and they make this network with these interconnections, and these signals are zipping back and forth all over the place. Well, the difference here is this coating that you see on the pathway in between the nerve cells on the right is called myelin, which is some sort of fatty substance that the body lays down over a pathway between nerves when it discovers that pathway is useful. So when we start out in life, we have networks in our brains pre-made. We come ready to see and we come ready to speak. Newborn baby, you talk to the baby, unless there's some physiological reason it cannot, the baby will learn to speak. Newborn baby exposed to light and pictures and faces, the newborn baby the brain will figure out how to determine what these patterns are, and that will be sight, that'll be vision. And there's other networks in the brain. We do not have a network for reading. We're not born with a reading network. But amazingly, what the brain does is pull together pieces of other networks that it does have and creates a network that is ready to read. So if you sing to the baby, rhyme words with the baby, you're already talking to the baby, point out plane, moon, dog, cat, read book to the child. Then over the years from birth to school age, the brain is laying down these layers of myelin along these nerve pathways in these different networks, among these various networks, making the signals go faster and more completely than if you didn't. And so by the time the child gets to school, that network is there and the good reading instruction comes along. And if the child hasn't figured out reading by the time they get to school, they will when they get the instruction because their brain is ready to receive it. So like I said, feel free to stop me with questions. I might not be able to see you unless you unmute and speak up. So that is a good reason why we should, even if it weren't fun, even if it wasn't cuddly and sweet and gave us nice, fond childhood memories, that's a good reason to read to kids from the time they're born and even after they can read on their own. And I'd like to introduce you to this guy, Dr. John Hutton. He's at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and he's fascinating. You can read about him everywhere. He's been in the New York Times. If you wanted to go to a page on our website, you see it there at the bottom. He came to West Virginia a couple of years ago, and he spoke to some educators and doctors at Marshall University. And he told us about his research, where he was trying to figure out if he can see something physiological going on when we read to children. And so what he did was he put these little preschoolers inside a functional MRI machine and read to them, and then studied the scans of their brains while they were being read to. And what he found was that when he read picture books to kids, the visual network in the brain was all lit up, and the speech network was involved, and there was all this interconnectivity, and even the part of the brain that controls movement seemed to be activated when a child was listening to a story. And he thought that was pretty interesting. And so he then thought, well, I wonder what happens if the kids listen to an audiobook instead. So he did similar scans on children listening to an audiobook. And what he found was that the amount of activity in the brain listening to an audiobook was much, much less. It's possible that the kids needed, at that age, needed the pictures to go with the book, and therefore they weren't quite getting as much meaning. His research is not, he couldn't conclude whether it was that or whether it was having the human being there reading it to you in person and in life. When you're not in an MRI machine, of course, we might be discussing it. It's coming to you from somebody you know. Who knows? The point is, the audiobook, there was a lot less brain activity. I happen to love audiobooks and I get a lot out of them. But then, of course, I'm grown. I've been reading my whole life. It might be that audiobooks are not the best for kids who are just starting out. So then he thought, what about an animated app? So this is the same story in every study. And he put the kids through, scanned their brains while they were experiencing the story through an animated app. And the visual section of the brain was all lit up. The activity there was just off the charts. But amazingly, the activity between the different sections of the brains had dropped by 37%. And he thought this was very telling. And he said to him, it looks like the audiobook is too cold, the animated app is too hot, but the paper picture book was just right, at least for that age. So he called that the Goldilocks effect. And he concluded, at least as far as we know now, for beginning readers, for babies, for little ones, the best technology is probably the old-fashioned paper picture book. So I just say that I'm not against technology. I'm using it now. I use it all the time. But there's a time and a place, and Dr. Hutton thinks that devices are not as good for kids as books are. You may have seen some of these numbers before. The impact of reading to kids and getting kids to read. This is done by the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, a wonderful group of people. So a student who reads at home for 20 minutes a day versus one who reads for a minute a day, you can see how this goes. Over the course of a year, the student who reads for 20 minutes a day is going to hear 1.8 million words versus next to no reading, only 8,000. So by the end of 6th grade, you see 850 hours of reading versus 42. And guess what happens when they go to school and take their tests? So much happens in that pleasurable reading time. Background knowledge, problems kids solve and think about. It's just beyond vocabulary. And so by the time that kid who's reading at home and reading for fun is going to be in the high range of test scores, and the one who doesn't isn't. So we've hit on a couple of things that happen when we read to kids. There's their vocabulary absolutely is served. Kids who are read to develop longer attention spans, which is interesting and helpful. It certainly contributes to their reading comprehension and therefore their test scores and grades. That's a picture of some little kid from Lewis County, by the way. All our pictures on here are local, I think, local as in West Virginia. And it's happening because of this. So when little Percy is looking at this book like this, her brain is telling, one part of the brain is telling another part of the brain, lay down some more myelin, she needs that connection. And that's happening all over the brain, every kid, day after day. This is London. And the things from the previous screen, then they just kind of telescope out through life. All those things, comprehension and test scores and grades, contribute to how far we go in school and even our lifetime earnings and our health outcomes as adults because of our ability. We know from other research, and this is fascinating in a whole different way, there's something about the experience we have, and I don't know, maybe you all want to talk about this. Have you ever been in a book where you absolutely adore the character? You get to the end of the book and you don't want to leave the character or the setting, or a new one in that series comes out and you can't wait to get back to it, like in the same way that you're looking forward to visiting your actual friends or family. There's something to that. There's something about the books we read, and a little bit of us in our brains actually experiences what they experience. So a child who reads a story or listens to a story where they experience some empathetic feelings for a character, they are developing that ability to do that in life with real people and real animals. There's something going on there that's really amazing. So all those things that we've talked about so far contribute to empathy and social and emotional growth, which is also a predictor of school success. I'll just tell you a little bit about this. This is a picture from WVU, and there's this really wonderful person at WVU. She used to be at Read Aloud. She did Read Aloud in Marion County, I believe. And she's in charge of the education of the children who are in the hospital at Ruby Memorial. And she had two things going on. She's got kids who maybe they're not well enough to do all their schoolwork, of course, but she wants to do what she can for their education. And we know reading to kids helps all those things we've talked about. She also had first-year medical students who were not qualified to do anything with patients, and yet she wanted them to have time with patients. So she put those two things together, and she put the medical students through Read Aloud orientation, and then she had them read to the kids. And this is a picture of one of their students doing that. We checked in with her, I don't know, 8 months, a year after they started doing that, and said, how's it going? And wrote a little story about it for our newsletter, which you can read on our website somewhere. And it was going fine. And we asked if it's healthcare. So we asked if they could see any health benefits aside from educational benefits. And she told us this story about a baby, an infant. I don't know that it was this baby. This is just the picture that we had permission to use. But she told us about an infant who had an accelerated heartbeat, and they were unable to get this baby's heart rate down to what they wanted it to be. And it was time for the student to come in and read, and the student started reading. Now picture this infant connected to all the monitors that they would have and the noises and sounds around. The student started reading to the baby, and the baby's heart rate decreased to a normal speed. Now, I don't know about you. When I told my predecessor, when I reported that to her, she burst into tears. But I know I personally have read to soothe myself. As a reader, I have that in my collection of coping mechanisms. I've never been attached to monitors when I've felt a good book soothe me. But here is someone so new to not even able to talk to us yet and tell us what they're experiencing. And there was something about that was medically healthy for that child. So that was not an outcome we were expecting, but it was so good I couldn't help but share it. Because when you do this, of course, and do this is what happens. So I will now turn to a few tips and tricks for being a good Read Aloud reader. Anybody have any questions or anything you want to bring up? I can't see all of you, so you'll have to make a noise or raise a hand or something. So you can imagine, I think normally all of our readers don't all read picture books. I read to older kids. I often read chapter books, which is what you're going to have. And you're blessed with a book that has one of the best openings in all of literature. It's like, where's Paul going with that axe or something like that. So, so you're obviously not going to read the whole book, but you're going to read enough of it to give the children a taste of it, and whet their appetite, so they'll be motivated to go read more of it later. So the first thing you want to do to be a good Read Aloud reader is practice, practice, practice. We tell our readers to read every picture book at least 3 times, and you certainly would read any chapter book at least once. A lot of you've probably already read Charlotte's Web. You know you're not going to get all the way through it. I highly encourage you to read the whole thing beforehand if you haven't, but you definitely want to practice the bit that you're going to have time to read. And because it starts off so well, you probably could just read that book by starting. Some books, the excerpt to choose might not be at the beginning, but in this case, it probably is the best bet. I would definitely find out how much time you're expected to read, and then time yourself and listen to yourself, because you're going to want to read it in an interesting way, certainly no monotone. Different ones of us, some people are really into hamming up voices and so forth. My attitude toward that is be yourself, be interesting. So if you really like doing that, that's great. Other people are put off by that and are too self-conscious, but they're still good readers. They read with expression, they read with emotion, they have good timing, and all that comes from practice. And there's the pretty picture. I went ahead and threw that in there just to remind us. Now, we have a lot more tips, and during COVID, when we started doing all these orientations virtually instead of in person, we started putting these materials on our website. The easiest way to get to some other materials, which include some suggestions of books that our readers have put together over the years, and also good lists of tips, do's and don'ts. A good way to refer to that is at this link, which you can get by either typing the link or scanning that QR code. I will just tell you, though, the sorts of things you will find on that page. If you were doing this regularly as a read aloud reader, you'd be choosing your own books. And so we talk about appropriateness, appropriate for the age, understand that children can understand a book they're being read to at a grade or two or more higher than what they can read for themselves, which is a really nice thing because it helps stretch them, and they move into that grade. They move up as they listen to more difficult texts. So there's a reference for you. Obviously, this is a little bit more regimented, and everybody sort of is going to be doing much the same thing, but you're going to want to watch the timing and the scheduling. You get matched with a teacher. If you were going back week after week, we'd say immediately get the teacher's cell phone, swap cell phone numbers so you can be in touch for scheduling purposes. Pictures obviously are part of the story. And in Charlotte's Web, you do have a few little sketches that you're going to want to be sure to show. I am not going to go through and read to you things that have to do with the rest of our orientation when you're going in week by week, but at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions and hear any discussions. You might have questions for Lena. Go ahead, I'm listening.
Dawn, would you talk about when kids, because when I've read to kids before, they'll, you're going to have a hand raised, and what happened, so what would you share with this group about how to kind of pause and answer a question, or how to interact with the kids in a way that kind of still continues with the flow of the book, but still makes them a part of the experience?
Well, that's an excellent question. You're exactly right. Sometimes kids need to hear something again. And if they're raising their hand and saying, wait, what happened? That's perfect, because they're engaged enough, they realize they've missed something. And if they're trying to check their understanding, that is exactly what you want readers to do. When those of us who are good, proficient readers are doing that all the time. We don't necessarily notice it now, but as we're reading something, we're constantly checking, did I understand that? Did that make sense? Does that track? And when it doesn't, we'll go back and reread something again. So it depends on what the child does. If the child is like, wait, what happened? Then you could reread. You could let somebody else in the class sum it up and answer. You could just answer the question. Another time, a child might say, I have a pig, and wants to take the conversation off the book and talk about their experience. And that also is nice and delightful. There's a bit more balance needed there, because in first grade especially, I find if you read a book about a dog, every kid in the class wants to tell you their dog story. What I try to do is be respectful, like you would of anyone else. Let the child finish if you can. And then after one or two of them have chimed in, gently say, I'd love to hear all these stories, but if I don't read this, I'm going to run out of time and we won't find out what happens. And that's usually enough. And then if that doesn't take care of it, usually the teacher says, okay, that's enough. And it makes them, because they're still learning, just like you all are old hands at this, to come to a meeting and mute and not take us off topic. Well, they're learning all that. They don't know it yet. And this is where they learn it. So those are a couple different types of questions you might encounter. There's also, you could get into whole conversations about, I don't know how much how far into Charlotte's Web you'll get. You might get kids who've read it before, kids whose teachers have read it to them before, kids who've seen the movie. And those are all wonderful connections too. It doesn't mean, oh, it doesn't have any value anymore. They've already experienced it. It's wonderful when the kids immediately connect something, you bring them to their own experience. So that's something to be affirmed. Does that help?
Yeah, it's a great point to make, and I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Just to reiterate, just want to reiterate, so our goal that day is to read the first 2 chapters. So our goal is to have 2 volunteers in every classroom. So each volunteer will get a chance to read a chapter. And I anticipate when that's done, as we're handing out books, they're going to ask questions. But that's our plan for each of the classrooms on that day.
That's really wonderful. I expect you'll find some kids who are surprised that they get to keep the books. Kids who aren't used to getting a lot of book distribution sometimes are. They might even try and give it back to you at the end of class. So, but that's nice. What else can I tell you? You really shouldn't be left alone with the classes. There should be a teacher with you at all times. That is a good policy for the safety of the kids and the safety of you. We haven't gone through all the trainings and all the things that you need to know about how school works and what's appropriate. So we're not there to teach, and we're not the disciplinarians. We're guests in the classroom. And what we tell all of our readers is be a good classroom guest. You arrive on time, you leave on time, you have your good professional manners on. You model the behavior you would want kids to pick up from you. And I try really hard, and I encourage others to try hard when kids have a question, when they want to have a reaction, let them have their natural reactions. It's, I think you'll love it. It's the highlight of my week. I know that.
Dawn, when should we receive the books? I've received the first chapter, so I assume that I'm responsible for that first chapter. And then whoever else is in the room with me will read the second chapter.
Okay, I'll let the United Way guys handle that. Go ahead.
Hi, yes. So we can't send out the second chapter, and you won't actually receive the book until you get to the classroom. So you will receive the book in the classroom. As far as practicing, what we found to work now is that you'll receive an email with 2 video links from YouTube. One is the first chapter being read to you with the book on screen, and the second is the second chapter being read to you with the book on screen. So you can listen to it the first time, and then you can turn the volume off and read along at your own pace. That answer the
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Very nice. Who's reading it? Do you know who's reading it on the video?
I do not, I'm sorry.
No, I was just curious. If you like it, that's somebody to imitate. And if you don't like it, that's somebody who's taught you what not to do. Very good. It's funny that you chose Charlotte's Web. That our founder, Mary Kay Bond, that's her absolute all-time favorite book. E.B. White is one of my favorite authors.
What's really great about choosing this book, and we had a couple of choices, and when we chose this book, we didn't know because we were reading some research. So October 15th was the 70th anniversary of the release of this book.
Wow.
And I also tracked down E.B. White's granddaughter, who lives in Maine, and we invited her to come. She was unable to do so, but she sent us this beautiful letter thanking us for reading her grandfather's book. And she sent us a picture of a pig. And every year at their county fair, they have a pig named Wilbur. And so it's just kind of really special. And I think that when I heard that from her, it kind of got me excited to share that with everybody and get everybody excited to go read a book that I'm sure we've all read.
Mm-hmm. That's nice. Nice. He's one of the best writers. I use him in my classes. Great. Any other questions?
Let me just mention, I had to look up what EB meant because as a former teacher, the students level asked you, what does EB mean?
That's
I had to look it
true.
up, and I'm assuming I pronounced this right. It's Elwyn Brooks.
I did not
I did
remember
not
that.
know that.
I didn't either. Very good idea. Be prepared.
Do you want to mention the t-shirts, right?
Just a quick, for those of you who are on here and those of you who will watch it later. So first of all, thank you for signing up. The reading times are 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. We're asking you to arrive 15 minutes early to sign in. You'll be given your Read Across the River Cities t-shirt. They're stretchy enough that they'll fit over, a dress shirt. And so we ask you to wear those. You'll be at a classroom and introduce yourselves, and I'm sure the kids will be excited when you tell them what you do. Remember that there's to be no photos of any children. We would ask that each volunteer take a photo of the other reading in the classroom so that we can use those to promote what you guys have done. But we don't want to show any kids' faces.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. That reminds me of something I always tell at our orientations. I always tell readers, you hear things at school. Stuff happens. A child social worker might come in. You might overhear one kid talking about another, and you pick up a detail. Just pretend you didn't hear it, forget about it, and certainly don't take it home and gossip about other people's kids. You just want to treat them the way you'd want kids in your family to be treated. Probably goes without saying, but it's nice to just think about it consciously before you're in that situation. Because probably nothing will happen, but every now and then something comes up. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Will be at the school, and the books will be at the school, and there is a bookmark as well for all of the kids.
Okay.
Any questions about the day itself? How that looks like? What a fantastic group.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, Sarah has been really fantastic about, keeping in contact with volunteers. So appreciate you, Sarah, for doing that, and for all of you who are getting those emails, and hopefully those are helping you keep updated and preparing you for November 15th. So, and by the way, it's my birthday on November 15th. So listen, you all are giving me the greatest birthday present ever by doing this and volunteering. So just think of it that way. So you don't have to give me any money. No money this year. Just go read to kids.
Have we answered all the questions? Lena, are we good?
Yeah, it looks like we're good. I looked at the people who's on, and many of these are educators or highly professional individuals that would be fantastic readers, fantastic representatives for our communities and the schools. We're so happy that you joined us on this event. And Dawn and I and everybody here at United Way are always available via the emails that you have received. So just let us know if there's any questions that comes up later.
Perfect.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, Lena, shall we let people go?
I think so.
Okay. Thank you all so much for your time and for your attention, and have a great event.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.